Hello and welcome to the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today is Monday, August 7th, 2023. Listen, the countdown has commenced to our forthcoming investor presentation, which is scheduled to take place, tentatively scheduled to take place this Thursday, August 10th at 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, as we lead up to this investor presentation, which, by the way, it would not surprise me at all if, as I speak, the slide deck for this investor presentation is being created. I always think to myself, that's got to be quite the process because, you almost have to figure out new ways to describe what's going on and do so in a way that's compelling, right? That's engaging and that accentuates, right, the very meaningful and very real progress that the company's making. But again, it's challenging, right? Because you got to put the slide deck together in a way that, all the numbers add up, everything makes sense, and hopefully, right, it's something that'll put the company, put Stronghold Digital Mining in the best light possible, not only for those on Wall Street, but of course for those of us in the ownership box who look to this investor presentation to get a sense of what's going on and where we're going. So leading up to that, we're going to just address a couple of issues, or at least talk about some of the different issues that have come up. And one issue has to do with administrative expenses. Let's pull up the first slide, please. So here's a Twitter response from the King that indicates in all caps, "How can you justify your astronomical administrative expenses?" That was a rhetorical question, of course. You can't. Red flag, red flag, red flag, S-stake. Back to me, please. Okay, so I have seen over the many months variations of that question, right? Paraphrasing here, questions to the effect of, hey, what's going on with administrative expenses as it relates to Stronghold Digital Mining? Now, my assumption, and it's a dangerous thing to assume, but I'm going to assume it anyway, is that this refers to the line item typically described as general and administrative, okay? Some companies word that slightly differently, but general and administrative, or G&A, is certainly how Stronghold Digital Mining labels that, okay? So I thought, hey, I haven't given a ton of thought to the issue of administrative expenses, but you know what? Given the fact we're going to be seeing what our Q2 2023 numbers look like in the coming days, at least as it relates to our expenses, right? Hey, why not do a bit of a deeper dive? So I did that, at least to a degree, okay? Let's pull up the next slide, please. So during our Q1 2023 investor presentation, we had basically a slide. It was basically page 9 or slide number 9 in the slide deck. And it's called Roadmap for Modeling Stronghold, Management's Key Model Inputs. I've referenced this particular slide in the past, different sections of it, but today I really want to zoom in on what you see circled at the very bottom there. It appears as if though, okay, our key model inputs include the following. Okay, and I'm going to be very, very careful with my wording here. It says what I believe to be $20 million annual cash G&A. And the G&A, I believe is a reference to general and administrative. I want to also highlight the word cash, right? So $20 million in annual cash G&A. That would seem to imply that there could be other perhaps expenses, right, that might fall under the category of G&A, but that might not, from an accounting standpoint, be classifiable as a cash outlay, so to speak. So, wave the magic accounting wand, and maybe there's some strange number in there that's dramatically high in nature. Well, I guess if it's, if it's not a cash outlay, it may not really matter ultimately, right? I mean, there are a lot of numbers that float around, an income statement, some of which are, cash related in the sense that, hey, this is money, just in layman's terms, hey, we got to cut a check, right, to pay this stuff. And then there's other stuff that it's like, hey, you know what? It counts as a loss, all right? But it's not like we had to like actually pay any money out of the checking account. So $20 million annual cash G&A. So as you see then on the right-hand side, I say, well, okay, hey, if you know, let's say going forward, because remember, this was released in our, I believe it was May 11th was when we had this investor presentation. So, all right, let's say, looking ahead, right, it seems like we're targeting $20 million annual cash G&A. Let's just sort of make that assumption. So if we take $20 million and we divide that by 4, right, or just take 20 divided by 4, that works out to $5 million a quarter. Because bear in mind, right, in any calendar year, you basically have 12 months in a year. And then when you break down those 12 months into quarters, well, then you're talking about 3-month chunks of time. I know I'm getting, it seems like that could be obvious at some level, but I just want to be really precise here so that there's, less confusion as to what I'm trying to explain. Okay, so if we're basically targeting $20 million annual cash G&A, okay, we divide that by 4, that works out to about $5 million per quarter. Now, this is a little bit trickier to see. You might have to squint, but right, for the 3 months ending March 31st, 2023, our general and administrative expenses were $8 million, or well, $8,468,755. Let's just call it roughly, say 8.5 million. Back to me, please. Okay, I know that was a lot of numbers there, but okay, so if we as Stronghold Digital Mining, right? And this is the big assumption, I want your feedback. Help me better discern if I'm reading this the right way. Okay, if I'm not, please tell me how to read this correctly. But if we are in fact saying, hey, we're looking at $20 million a year, right, in annual cash G&A, and we're dividing that, right, I'm saying, hey, well, right, we report results on a quarterly basis, so, hey, you say, okay, let's divide that by 4. It looks like we're targeting about $5 million a quarter. Q1 2023, right, which one could make the argument, well, you know what, but that was sort of before, like going forward, this is kind of like what we're targeting. Okay, but just for the sake of, having the conversation, yeah, like 8.5 million, that's much higher, right, than $5 million, okay? But then it kind of got me thinking, well, you're running a business. Yes, it seems like we're targeting 5 million. By the way, do you agree with that? Am I like, I'm asking in a sincere way. Help me validate this math. Am I correct in assuming that we're sort of looking at about $5 million a quarter in, general and administrative expenses? That's like what we're targeting. You tell me, okay? But if that's true, yes, hey man, you're right. Yeah, it looks like we're targeting 5 million. Okay, so yeah, Q1 2023, we were above 5 million, right? By several $1 million. Okay, fair enough. But then, what, like again, I'm not into comparison, but in the absence of like really having anything else to look at, it's kind of hard to sort of make sense of this. So let's put up this next slide, please. So what we're looking at is a little spreadsheet thing I put together earlier today. This is the Q1 2023 G&A expenses for several companies in the publicly traded Bitcoin mining ecosystem. You're welcome to independently check out this data. Hey, if I made a typographical error, please let me know. All right. But it looks like Marathon clocked in at about $15.3 million in general and administrative expenses for Q1 2023. Riot clocked in at about 12.6 million. Gree clocked in at about 9 million. Stronghold Digital Mining, as I mentioned a moment ago, about 8.5 million. Hey, real quick, before we go any further, you're going to hear me refer to CleanSpark as ClearSpark. I'm so terribly sorry. Remember, I'm focused on Stronghold Digital Mining, so I don't really know a whole lot about these other companies. Anyway, let's go on with the show. ClearSpark, right? CLSK, about 4.3 million. And then finally, Cypher clocked in at about, 17.4 million. Now, when you look at this, right, there's only one other company, right, ClearSpark, that appears to be dramatically below where Stronghold Digital Mining happened to be. Back to me now, please. So when I saw that, I'm like, well, gosh, if Stronghold Digital Mining has astronomical general and administrative expenses, right, or administrative expenses, however you want to like phrase that, like, dang, man, like some of these other companies, they're like double, practically more than double, like where we're at. So I'm not sure what to make of this other than to say, right, Stronghold Digital Mining appears to be targeting $5 million a quarter in annual cash G&A. Q1 2023, we were above that $5 million goal. Again, did the goal count really for Q1? That's unclear to me, okay? But let's assume, hey, that investor presentation was early May of 2023. Let's just assume, hey, going forward, that's what we're targeting. So yes, in the context of our own internal, model input, so to speak, yeah, we were above what we're targeting. In the grander context of, some of the companies within the Bitcoin mining ecosystem, and again, I just picked companies that kind of came to mind. I mean, this is not intended to be, some sort of like exhaustive sample of every publicly traded company that's out there, okay? But based on that data, I mean, it would appear as if though we are actually on the lower end of the range. So here's my question. Is $5 million per quarter in general and administrative expenses, what do you think? Is that an appropriate amount? Okay, if the answer is like, yeah, that does sound more appropriate, then good, because that's what we're targeting. If the answer is no, that is still astronomically high, right? Let's assume $5 million a quarter in G&A expenses. Then my follow-up question as part of our conversation is, well, hey man, like what would be, right, a more appropriate number? Now look, I get it, right? We'd all love for that number to be $1, right, or something like that. But we got to kind of keep it real too. We're a company that has a lot of interesting assets, right? We own our own power assets. We own our own data centers. I mean, does that suggest that we're going to have some general and administrative expenses that are above $1, right? You know what I'm trying to get at? Like that there's going to be something in that line item that's greater than 1. So then the argument is, well, all right, or the question is, well, what should it be then? If 5 million's still astronomically high, okay, well, how about, I don't know, you tell me, because I don't want to guess, and I don't want to try to like assume that I understand kind of like what, what's in a person's mind, right? When we say, hey, what should that number actually look like? And then we can start to have a productive conversation about, hey, how realistic is it to hit that number? I mean, looking at what I'm looking at and what we both collectively looked at, I would agree that if in fact we're targeting $20 million a year in annual cash G&A, then yes, absolutely, with 1000% conviction, I can get behind a $5 million per quarter G&A expense. I think that's a phenomenal target. It's practically, it's a really good number, okay? From my perspective, looking at those key model inputs that I just shared with you a moment ago and which were shared with all of us, right, during the Q1 2023 investor presentation. So that's going to be a number that we all collectively have to look forward to seeing, right, as it relates to Q2. How did we do when it came to G&A expenses? And to the extent we were still way above $5 million, then we're going to have to, we have to answer the question, right? Or Stronghold Digital Mining then has to answer the question, how, again, just reading this, sort of like at face value, if it says $20 million annual cash G&A, help me explain help me understand what that actually means then, and what we should think about in terms of G&A expenses on a quarterly basis. And look, I get it. This is a very dynamic business. I understand that there are a lot of unknowns that sometimes come up. These are not guarantees, right? Right? I'm trying to get at, like, this is the real world, right? This isn't a video game where we can just kind of like create numbers and magically hit them or not hit them. I mean, it's a very challenging environment. But at least let's all sort of try to get on the same page as to what the goal is. What's the metric? What are we aiming for? And once we understand that, then I think we're in a better position to really then have a conversation about, hey, are administrative expenses like astronomically high or not? Like maybe they're really not that high. Okay. Again, I'm not saying either way. I'm just saying, let's have the conversation. This is some data that we have to sort of like work with. Tell me what you think. I want to hear your side of this. I want your input as to what the number should be. Is 5 million the better number to have per quarter? If not, what would be your number? Okay. The countdown continues. Let's stay positive. Let's be great. And we'll see each other again tomorrow.